Greetings, everyone. This is Sangeet Grover. I'm the founding director of FuturoKnowledge. It is an organization dedicated to sustainable initiatives, education, and entrepreneurship. We at FuturoKnowledge aspire to be a catalyst in helping the SMEs to navigate successfully during this tough time and build sustainable businesses and a fully engaged workforce. Today, we are bringing to you the first ever introduction to an absolutely new concept called social futuring directly from its creators and our renowned speakers for today. I'm truly excited to see the release of Social Futuring Index, which is planned for launch around November 2020 to 36 OECD countries to begin with. And it is such a privilege for FuturoKnowledge to have the first live introduction to this concept. Now, what is social futuring? Social futuring is a new term coined by Social Futuring Center of Corvinus University, Budapest in Hungary. It is a new approach to measure a society's ability to strategically plan for the future and then be able to sustain itself into the future while attempting to maintain its broad goal of achieving the good life. What is the good life then? And what do we expect a nation or country to provide for its citizens in terms of a good life? We all keep asking this question, and it is also one of the oldest philosophical questions. Ancient Greek philosophers were the first ones to unpack this wisdom and bring about the concept of the good life to the world. Socrates emphasized on virtue as an important factor in leading a good life, whereas Epicurus emphasized on pleasure as an important factor to a good life. The great Greek thinker Aristotle viewed the good life in a more comprehensive way. So according to Aristotle, we all want to be happy. But what are the conditions that can make us happy and satisfied? So according to him, the first is virtue. We must be morally virtuous. Second is health. We should enjoy good health and reasonably a long life. Third is prosperity. We should be comfortably off. For Aristotle, this meant affluent enough so that we don't need to work for a living. And this is what we are all aspiring for, isn't it? Fourth is friendship. For Aristotle, friendship is one of the most important virtues in achieving the goal of eudaimonia, which means happiness. While there are different kinds of friendship, the highest is one that is based on virtue, also called arete in Greek. I also truly believe that we as human beings are innately social. So the good life cannot be that of a hermit or a recluse or a misanthrope. So the fifth condition to make us happy is respect. Aristotle doesn't think that fame or glory is necessary. In fact, a craving for fame can lead people astray, just as a desire for excessive wealth can. But ideally, a person's qualities and achievements will be recognized by others. Sixth is luck. We all need good luck. Seventh is engagement. We must exercise our uniquely human abilities and capacities. This is why the couch potato is not living well, even if they report that they are content. Aristotle argues that what separates human beings from other animals is the human reason or the human purpose. So the good life is one in which a person cultivates and exercises their rational faculties to engage in some activity or the other. Was he alive today, he might well include some forms of technological innovation. If at the end of your life you can check all these boxes, then you could reasonably claim to have lived well, to have achieved the good life. Hence, this is what the Social Futuring Index will be doing. It will capture the futurabilities of countries over a 30-year horizon applying statistical methods. With the stage set, it is time for a housekeeping rule. If you have any questions during the presentation, please give them in the comments box. I will bring them up after all the speakers have finished. Let's now welcome our first esteemed speaker, Dr. Aczél. Petra Aczél has been a lecturer at Corvinus University of Budapest since 2011 and director of the Institute of Behavioral Science and Communication Theory from 2012 to 2019, and is one of the outstanding figures of scientific life at the university. In 2019, she was awarded the Civil Order of the Knight's Cross of the Hungarian Order of Merit. Her main research areas include rhetoric, communication, and media communication. Following the transformation of the university's institutional system from 2020, she is the head of the university's Institute of Communication and Sociology, and as such, she is responsible for the educational, research, and professional management of the institute and its affiliated departments. Dr. Petra, it is an honor to have you here. Handing over the mic to you.
Thank you so much, Director Grower. This is a pleasure for me to greet you and all the viewers who I'm so grateful to be with us today from Budapest. I mean, in fact, Budapest and Hungary is under very bad weather conditions these moments, but I feel so cheered up to be with you and so connected to Singapore in these moments, in this hour, which I hope we can spend, I mean, valuably. And my task today is to cover the main kind of points of the concept of this novel and brand new term and concept, social futuring. And Professor Szántó, who was kind to follow me on this path, I mean, his talk will just cover how the index built on this concept will be just introduced and what the elements and the structure of that index are. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I do think that we all think about the future, and there are at least two ways of thinking about it. We want to know what it brings for us and what it entails for us, so we get to be very worried. That's very evolutionary, and we are so happy to be worried about our future, because if we are evolutionary going on our pathways, we have to be worried about our futures because we don't know much about it. So one way to deal with the future is to know more about it, statistically, kind of strategically, planning it, thinking about it, and so forth. And the other thing is to know ourselves better. I mean, if we are just preparing ourselves, our societies, the environment that we are responsible for. So if we are preparing these assets and these capacities for the future, we are actually thinking about ourselves, what we are capable of, what we are heading for, what we should be doing so that we could be preserving ourselves for our best future. Now, social futuring, the whole concept, tries to somehow add these two perspectives up. So if you think about a future and you see films or read kind of theoretical works, for example, of Professor Harari, telling you that the future is rather dark and we will be just overwhelmed by technology, for example, and we will lose our the best human factors that we own this moment. Now, I mean, that's a problem because dystopias are just depriving us of our kind of dynamism to go on. But on the other hand, if you just want to deal with yourself and the societies that you live at the moment in, you will not be able to see this kind of further perspective. So social futuring is a novel concept introduced so that we could just kind of combine our use of the future on the basis of Greek and Taoist philosophy and religious kind of studies and political studies and social theories. So our kind of center at the Corvinus University of Budapest was formulated in 2017 with the aim to just lay down the foundations of a new concept that can compete with terms and concepts like competitiveness, resilience, future-proofing, or even future orientation. We are quite okay with all these terms. We do think that they are very useful for what they were kind of invented for. But what we said and what we started for was to somehow make an even more comprehensive, or at least a kind of new perspective to look into our capacities that are for the future. And when I mean our capacities, we mean societies and not just persons. Societies rather than, let's say, rather than organizations. So our aim was in 2017 and has been for some years now, is to found this concept of social futuring and then build a very usable measurement. That is the social futuring index that Professor Szántó is soon to be kind of introducing, will soon to be introducing to you. Now, I will just try to use my camera in a way that I can share my screen with you. So yes, what I'm thinking about is to show you what our concept is centered around. And Director Grover, dear Sangeet, was so nice to give these introductory sentences, but we can even, go on and show you that in the very center of our concept is good life in the so-called unity of order. Now, what is a good life? The minimum kind of definition that I will give now after having this wonderful introduction at the beginning of our webinar is that a good life is what entails all the norms like security, that is virtue, stability, attachment, relations, morals, symbols, and assets and environments that we live around. But moreover, it's not just what we have. Good life is about what we share. And when we talk about good life in a unity of order in terms of a society, we think about the aims that we are able to share for the future, the aims, the fulfillment of which we are eager to participate in. All of us are eager to participate in. So when I talk about social futuring and we talk about the term itself, which is, I think you feel how it sounds, because social futuring sounds very futuresque and very new. Yes, it took a long time for us to find the best term that coins what we're thinking about, but please look for this definition. So it's a term that we think societies can kind of handle their changes and their futures with. Change is in the middle of this definition, and changes can be very different. Think about just the coronavirus situation. Many say that it was not very expected or not very seen from early on. No one knew how the virus would spread and how countries will deal with it. Yes, some changes are expectable, some changes are coming out of the blue, or at least this is what we feel. But we should have the minimum kind of understanding of what a kind of society can deal with changes. And so let me go on. We wanted to kind of compete with terms that are already there and wonderfully operating in the academia or with policymakers or with politicians or with kind of organizational CEOs. And these terms are resilience. We all heard about resilience, the kind of flexible coping with trauma, when people and societies and communities can learn from their failures and get better. But social futuring is not just resilience, is more, because it's more strategic than the resilience. Or we dealt with future orientation. Future orientation is something really what humans and societies can have. Looking forward to the future, think about it, plan it, and live with the future even in the present. But social futuring, as we thought, is a bit more of it, because again, it's more kind of strategic, it has more levels, and also it entails the characteristics of future orientation. It's not the synonym of it. And finally, there is a very well used and widely used term, future proofing. And future proofing is about the kind of saving all the resources for an investment that promises a long-lasting kind of novelty. Think about technology. If you're an investor and you want to invest in a new kind of technological development, you will want to know whether it will stand the try and the problem of time. You will want a robust system, and so you won't invest if you don't get it. Now, future-proofing has a lot in common with social futuring, but while future-proofing is about preserving not just investments, but also traditions and preserving ways of life and so forth, social futuring has more of it because it tells you that you need the capacity to change if you need to. Let's go deeper into our kind of notion and term, what is social futuring? What we thought, and now you see the whole diagram of ours, which is quite colorful, and we do hope that you will visit our webpage and give it more time to just browse through the main concepts here. But let's go on and let's see again. So social futuring is a social entities, not a person's, not an organization's in that sense, but a social entity's creative intent. So it's intentful, it's intentional, and it's ability, it's a kind of skill that you can have or at least recognize in yourselves as a society and even at a personal level, of course. So what is a social entity? It sounds very easy, but it's not so easy to define. We all live in communities like cities and countries, even in regions, even on continents, even on bigger kind of historical circles. But what we had to do is to define what makes a social entity. And we say that we call something a social entity that can be socially futured when it's operating and it functions. It is able to function itself. When it is able and wishes to reproduce itself for a longer period of time. Think about kind of demographic issues. When it has its own knowledge of itself, it has its self-conscience, it's self-aware and can self-reflect itself, like as a community, as a society. When it's constituted, it has its rules, it has its order, and it's politically and economically and functionally reflected. And so this constitutional kind of level is higher than the functional level, we all know. And as for the fifth kind of necessary condition for a social entity to be a social entity, and thus ready for the future, that it has to have its own definition of a good life. I mean, good life is not something universally and rationally constituted. It's communal in that sense. And all those people living have their rights to define their countries and their social entities' definition of a good life. Now, if a social entity has its necessary conditions, then we think that it will be able to handle changes in three different ways. It will be able to prepare itself for changes, so be ready and not kind of rejecting even the notion of change. It will be kind of, or it has to be able to manage risks that present changes entail, like what, again, the coronavirus, but even economical issues. Think about the so-called global economic crisis that just bursted out in 2008. And so many economical kind of theories and approaches were born out of it. And finally, it has to have the capacity and the ability to create changes that are beneficial for it. I mean, a society is not something stable. It's dynamic and it changes by its nature, but it also can have an awareness to create change. And so this is a type of so-called social futuring. So when it deals with changes that are to come, then it's active. If it deals with changes that are here and we need to react to them. It's reactive social futuring. And finally, when we create changes, we are proactively social futured. Now, when we were thinking about this whole concept and all the philosophical, theoretical, social theoretical backgrounds, we decided to see how a society functions. And it has at least 4 kind of pillars in which it functions. Think about the ecological and geopolitical dimension, or just pillar. Let's call it a pillar here. Yes, we all live in an environment. We have our space, and this space entails not just the place where we live, but the nature, the environmental resources, the assets that we are given or that we are creating. So that's one pillar in which we function as a society. And yes, we have our technologies. Don't just think about the computer technologies or information technologies that we are so overwhelmed these days. Think about all by which we function, the roads, the ways we are connected, and we have been connected for a longer time in history. Technology entails more than just IT. It entails cars and the ways we can make our ways and the ways we can just connect each other instrumentally. So the technological pillar is about instruments that societies use. So places, instruments, and then relations. Because we all live in a network society globally and locally as well. And relations entail families, and relations entail possibilities, like education. So relations by which we grow ourselves as individuals and persons, and ourselves as societies. And finally, all societies have a symbolic kind of way of living, expressing ourselves, preserving our ways of living and keeping them for future generations in a way that they're flexible enough to be livable. So places, instruments, relations, and symbols is what's in a way kind of creates us as societies. And this was a very founding kind of basis upon which we built with our small group of scientists and then a bigger group of scientists, because we worked with many kind of academicians from different fields of knowledge like political sciences, economy, philosophy, geopolitics, network sciences, even communication studies, as you may have heard, sociology, psychology. So we stated and we wanted to find a kind of good framework for all what we found out about social entities, because we wanted to describe in our index and in our concept how this social entity can live and can lead its life by. And this was our kind of very important and significant and seminal normative frame. So we built up a normative frame that is best to be kind of displayed in a pyramid and starts on the very low level. It's not a low level, but it's the basis with peace and security. You need to feel stable and peaceful and secure if you want to live. That's the minimum of life. That's what we thought. Upon this, a new level is built. That's attachment. So a healthy society, as a healthy individual, cannot live without connections, without networks, without relations. And upon that, there is the urge to feed ourselves with material and symbolic advancements. We need assets to feed all these kind of living organizations that we are. And finally, on the top of this pyramid, we need to ever reflect the balance that we have about ourselves as individuals and persons, and about the generosity that we should have for the future, and so the generosity to share with future generations the life that we have. So these are our normative standards, and altogether these make up a life worth living. This is how we just translate it in the easy way. Now this very philosophical foundation was badly, if I may say it so, needed, and it's academically founded, so that we could see how the index will be built up. So our index needed to be, we call it eros. You may know that in Greek, in Greek, eros is love. So we wanted to create an academically and socially lovable index that will give results with its rankings and with its points answer to the layman and to the professional as well in an easy and clear and lovable way about how, at what level are we at a society society is at the moment in prospect of its future. And so we needed an index that entails eros. We needed an index that's evident, so clearly showing, robust. If anything changes, think about indices. Indices need a lot of data. And if the structure of the index and the concept of the index is not clear, it's not going to be robust enough and thus flexible. Orienting. So yes, we would like to show an aspect of how to think about our futures as societies. And finally, subtle. So subtle in a way that people would love, even in academia, in policy making, and so forth, would love to talk about it. So that was my talk, and I would love to give the word to Professor Szántó if I can. We can't hear you, Sangeet.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor Aczél.
Thank you, Dr. Petra, for an enlightening and rewarding speech. Really appreciate that. May I request you to highlight a couple of takeaways for the convenience of the audience? What I really liked, about the entire speech was when you mentioned eros is on top of the list, and we'll discuss that later. But can you just give a couple of takeaways for the convenience of the audience here? Thank you.
So yes, sure. The first takeaway is that there is a new term to think about, and that is social futuring. Social futuring is a competing and new term. The second takeaway is that social futuring is about the society's good life in a unity of order. So it's about the capacity to live, to react to, and to create changes. And finally, social futuring is a term that founds a new index that is to be launched this year in late autumn, the Social Futuring Index. And this index is going to be competing with many, many others in the world that are either concentrating on economy or happiness. Ours, the Social Futuring Index, aims to give a more comprehensive way of looking at society in terms of the future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Petra. And now it gives me immense pleasure to introduce our next honorable speaker, Dr. Szántó. Dr. Zoltán Oszkár Szántó is an economist and sociologist. He graduated from the legal predecessor of Corvinus University of Budapest in 1987 as an economist, teacher, and sociologist. In 2010, his achievements were recognized with the Knight of Cross from the Order of Merit of the Hungarian Republic. Dr. Szántó focuses on analytical social theories and economic sociology in research and teaching. During his career, he has taken part in 12 applied research projects and 15 basic research programs. He regularly gives talks at conferences in Hungary and abroad. The number of his Hungarian and English language scholarly publications amounts to 124. More recently, as a researcher, he has been intrigued by the field of social futuring. It has been a real challenge to have the Corvinus Institute for Advanced Studies recognized as one of the most prominent institutions of the region in both Hungarian and foreign academic circles. A flagship unit of the remodeled university as a knowledge incubation and research ecosystem and economic and social disciplines aims to act as a major contributor to implementing the university's research strategy and to shifting the dimension of the university's performance in both research and publications. Dr. Szántó, we are excited to hear of the research that you have done in the field of social futuring. The stage is all yours, sir. You're on mute, sir. Yep.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Warm greetings from Budapest. Based on the talk given by Professor Aczél, I try to outline the logic of the Social Futuring Index. The study of resilience, future orientation, and future proofing, as it was discussed by Professor Aczél, contribute new insights into how cultures differ and what parameters affect an individual's or a group's ability to engage the world around them over time. Social futuring aims to do the same while providing a normative framework for the analysis. But as a project, it is not merely an intellectual endeavor. The Social Futuring Initiative set the practical goal of developing the Social Futuring Index, a composite measure of countries comprising a number of dimensions and indicators in 4 pillars. The indicators of the index are selected from a number of internationally recognized databases, which are provided by OECD, World Bank, World Values Survey, etc. The focus of the index is a life in a unity of order, which means that we based our index on the conceptual framework, which was outlined by the introductory talk by Professor Aczél, which can be characterized by the 4 normative standards, as it was mentioned, namely peace and security, attachment, care, and balance. If we put together these 4 normative standards and the 4 pillars, which was also mentioned by Professor Aczél, we can have some kind of a matrix logic of the Social Futuring Index. But also we have to mention that we focus only on the most important dimensions of this matrix, which means that we focus on the essential dimensions of the Social Futuring Index. After a long discussion with our colleagues at the Social Futuring Center, we decided to use 9 different dimensions, 9 different essential dimensions at this 4 normative level, at the 4 normative standards level. Let's start with the most basic normative standards, namely peace and security. As you can see on the figure, we have identified 3 different dimensions at this level, namely defense and safety, assets, and functionality. This is the basis of the index. We can define defense and safety in the following way. Defense and safety is the ability and the sense of duty to create and maintain the integrity of a social entity's external and internal order. The aim is to provide for a peaceful and safe environment that allows for prosperity and improvement towards a good life in a unity of order. The second dimension at peace and security standard is related to the strategic assets of a social entity. The creation and maintenance of critical resources is important. The aim is to provide a proactive basis for a social entity, whether it is a country, an organization, a city, whatever, to prosper and improve towards a good life in a unity of order. And finally, we have the functionality dimension at the level of peace of security. Functionality is the systemic and creative deployment of natural and artificial infrastructures. The aim is to provide for a state-of-the-art and competitive basis for social futuring. If we go to the level of attachment, which is the second normative standards, we can see that there are also three essential dimensions here. First, patriotism, second, family, and finally, spirituality. These are the dimensions of attachments we treat essential. Patriotism is the ability to translate interpersonal attachments towards belonging to greater communities, such as a nation, such as a city, whatever. The aim is to work and sacrifice for community goals by understanding that human beings can achieve more together than alone, which is an important aspect regarding cooperation and this kind of stuff. The second dimension is family, the creation of baseline attachments in parents, children, and close-kin relationships, and their utilization in social networks. The aim is to prepare for an efficient and meaningful management of a social entity's natural and artificial assets, tools, and means. And finally, we have the third dimensions here, namely spirituality, the devotion of time and resources to aspirations beyond material well-being and individual existence. The aim is to provide a broader perspective for a social entity to use natural and artificial circumstances and resources. Let's have a look at the care normative standard. As you can see, we have defined here two different dimensions, namely self-reliance on the one hand and material advancement on the other. Self-reliance is the continuous improvement of oneself to comprehend the complexity of the human condition, to be able to choose between different options. The capacity and ability for self-determination to actualize one's potential and establish self-worth. The aim is to use mental capacity to maximize room to maneuver for the benefit of our own and other loved ones' well-being. We can also define material advancement in the following way. It is the provisioning and maintenance of material existence. The aim is to improve material circumstances without jeopardizing next generation's room to maneuver. And finally, we have the fourth normative standard, namely balance. And here we have defined well-being and generativity as the most important or essential dimensions. Well-being and generativity is the management of social, material, and reputational differences. The aim is to be content with one's relative social position throughout life, to refrain from using narcotics and opioids, and the ability to enjoy the contribute to fellow human beings' advancement. The Social Futuring Index is a composite index of sub-indexes comprising a hierarchical indicator system based on the conceptual framework defined by the project. Simply put, the Social Futuring Index is a weighted average of carefully selected indicators which best capture the elements of social futuring. The Social Futuring Index comprises 28 indicators which were selected with the assistance of an expert panel. All indicators are normalized on a scale, and the indicators are weighted and aggregated according to the structure of the Social Futuring Index framework, which means that peace and security get 40% weight, attachment 30% weight, care 20% weight, and balance 10% weight. And also we treat essential the assets dimensions and the family dimensions, which means that they have double weight in calculating the social futuring index at the country level, which we will publish for the OECD countries in November this year. In order to best grasp the concept of the indicator, a hierarchical structure has been selected from a number of indicator system structures. The hierarchical structure makes it possible to create sub-indicators at different levels to examine the context of the conceptual framework, which make the analysis even deeper. In general, such indicator systems are the most suitable for better presentation of complex, multi-dimensional phenomena. So this is the logic of the social futuring index we have developed based on the conceptual and discursive framework, and we are now preparing for the launching of the social futuring index for the OECD countries in November this year, as it was mentioned. Thank you for your attention. It was a short introduction of the index.
Which is quite nice. Thank you, Dr. Szántó. In fact, it sparked some curiosity in my mind regarding the percentage you're giving to the normative standards. You know, I'm going to come up with a question later. How do you measure that, and how do you, assign that percentage to the normative standards? That was really interesting. So, dear audience, we will closely monitor and keep updating new development in this field through our Facebook and YouTube channels. So please stay connected and also follow our renowned speakers for latest information in this field through the links provided in our invites. And now, my dear audience, it is time for our Q&A session. Let me just check the questions and okay. Oh, yeah. So we have some fantastic comments from our audience. So there is a question from Sean Bruno from Sydney. Would normal public have access to the social futuring index? Who would like to take this question? Dr. Petra, okay.
I just wanted to take this wonderful question, for which I'm truly thankful, because I'm responsible in a way for communication, and Professor Szántó knows how eager I am to answer questions concerning communication, of course. So the answer is of course. We are now building up, and I think a very spectacular kind of web page for the index alone. It's going to be connected to our web page of the Social Futuring Center, which is a kind of institutional unit at the Corvinus University of Budapest. So again, there's going to be a web page for the index at which normal people, I would love this normal public expression. So everyone, in fact, everyone could just look for the results, the explanations, the background concepts, the ways and the methods by which we just got to that result. So yes, please be aware and be on the alert, and we would be kind of honored to have the chance to share these links with you the moment they are ready. I mean, we are now working on it. It's very close. It's due to be introduced. The web page as the index is due to be introduced in the second half of this year. I mean, I would say in autumn, late autumn. So thank you for the question.
Okay, here is an interesting question from my sister Shalu Chopra from Goa. She writes, how do we make social futuring more participative? For example, what can I do at a micro level to be more responsible and be more future oriented? Would Dr. Szántó like to take this up, or Dr. Petra?
Thank you very much for this very interesting question. On the one hand, we focus on social entities, as it was mentioned by Professor Aczél and by myself as well. But it does not mean that we forget about the so-called agency problem, which means that every social entity consists of agents, individuals, persons who are responsible for their own faith. It means that, for example, if you are aware of the social futuring approach, which is one kind of a strategic approach, not only to business issues, not only to environmental issues, but also for spiritual, cultural, social, demographic issues, you could be more engaged in this kind of project. I would say that if you get the idea, you will share one of our mottos, that our task is to prepare for the future. And of course, you have to start it at the micro level. And as a result, as an intended or unintended consequence, the whole community you live in, the whole region you live in will be more future oriented. So yes, you can be participative. Please,
yes, Dr.
Petra.
Just a short comment. The first is that I love this picture of a dog as a dog lover, so let me greet your dog too from here, from Budapest. And the second is that, I don't want to be kind of funny, but we would really love if you could read some more kind of material, because first step could be that you read more material on social futuring. That's just a joke in a way, but of course, everything starts for us. The whole thing is measurable on the societal kind of dimension, but that's derivable from there. It's derivable to the individual. Societies are not without individuals, or as we call them, persons. A person is more than an individual. A person has its right to look forward to the future, to train herself, to look into the future and be ready for that, be brave enough to take changes and create changes. So of course, it has its personal level and we are not excluding it. Thank you.
Dr. Petra, Shalu Chopra is my youngest sister, and that's our dog Max. Okay. Next question from Mrs. Nusrat Haq from Bangladesh. The question is, won't the developed countries have a different set of standards than developing countries? Dr. Szántó?
Yes, this is a very important question. When we started our intellectual endeavor 3 years ago, we established an international cooperation with researchers from other countries, from other continents, from Asia to America, from different European countries. And of course, one of the most important questions was whether these normative standards are general for any countries, any social entities, or are there differences in different cultures, in different continents, in different nations. At the moment, we are on the position that these normative standards, like peace and security, is quite general for any social entities. Without peace and without security, you cannot function a social entity, a country, an organization, whatever. In other words, if you can choose between peace or war, most of the people in the world would vote for peace instead of war. Let's compare certain secure and unsecure situations. What do you like better? Of course, most of the people in Asia, in Europe, in
Dr. Petra, yes, please. If you
Yeah,
could take.
I think I'll go on and help Professor Szántó out while he is a bit mute. So, and more than one question is just regarding this question whether we should reformulate these standards for different countries. Well, at this moment, yes, our proposition and our assumption is that what we did is that we worked for universal kind of frames and conditions for every social entity all around the world, independent from the present, let's say, GDP status or whatever economical statistics can be just at hand to kind of read the present position of a country. So we do think that these normative standards, again, peace, attachment, care, and balance are not dependent on the present financial, fiscal, whatever situations. They are kind of universal, and in a way, I know that's going to be a bit of an exaggeration, but eternal. I mean, it has been for a long time the standard set of human life and human society's life, but we, in a way, started to forget about it. So we overemphasized some parts of it, and that's why our framework is universal. However, and I think that all these wonderful questions are regarding this, we, of course, will see after the first release of the index whether this framework has to be flexibly kind of reformulated with kind of getting more aspects and counting with more aspects. However, again, we will need a framework that is applicable to transparent databases all around the world, and that's again a challenge. So when there is a data for a so-called an index in transparent global databases for one prospect that we need, there may be no data for, let's say, for Singapore or even for Nigeria. So we will have to remain very kind of reliable in the sense of in terms of data as well. So we hope that after the first release, which we invite you to kind of accompany us with, we will be able to work more on it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Petra. There's a question. It is what is the difference between resilience, future-proofing, and social futuring? This is by Kavita Khurana from India. So, what is the difference between resilience, future-proofing, and social futuring?
I will be very, very brief kind of discussing this because I think I, in a way, mentioned it in my first brief kind of introduction. One is that resilience is about coping with trauma, and it has its psychological, physical, and even network studies kind of roots when scholars are discussing it. But social futuring is not only and not exclusively about coping with something that's already there, you see? Social futuring is about kind of preparing ourselves for something that's coming, whether it's a change or it's just a continuation of life. So that's one main difference. With social proofing, I also mentioned that social proofing, and the term itself kind of tells you that it proves that the future will be there. Now, we needed something with an ing, a gerund. It's not always, it cannot be always proved. You cannot be always kind of certain that you preserved everything. And moreover, sometimes you come to the conclusion at the level of societies, but even individually, that something that you wanted to preserve, like a way of life, your habit of going out every morning or every evening, is something that you shouldn't preserve in the circumstances of change. So that's what social futuring is different in when it comes to social proofing. It's that it doesn't only and exclusively concentrate on preservation, but it also looks for change. And social future orientation is a wonderful term. However, it's mainly used when it's about the growing of an individual. Think about adolescent studies, psychological studies that kind of examine and pursue research upon how people look forward to their futures, whether they are culturally kind of framed in how they invite their own futures, or whether they have their own individual kind of sets to deal with the future. So future orientation is a very broad concept, and social futuring wanted to be a bit more specific with regard to societies. So these are the main differences. Thanks.
Just one sentence to add to this excellent reply by my colleague. Professor Aczél has a paper titled Discursive Concept of Social Futuring, and there is an excellent comparison of these terms in details. So if you are interested in the topic, I kindly recommend to read her excellent discussion, which can be downloaded from our homepage. Thank you.
Yes, we'll be providing the links to the audience as well. And I think we've had fantastic comments. And there's another question for Dr. Szántó. What are the special features of Social Futuring Index?
Thank you very much. It is also a very important question because there are many indices available in the world reflecting different aspects of social life. When we started to develop the index, we made a survey of different country level indices available in the world and which are somehow related to our social futuring index. Of course, we made a discussion about the Happy Life Index, about the Human Development Index, about the Global Resilience Index, and many other indexes. But as a result, we would like to emphasize at least three very important characteristics of our index. The first is that we have made explicit our normative framework, not only in our conceptual works, but also in our index development work. So we stated explicitly which are the normative frameworks we are thinking about good life in a changing world. So this is one characteristic. The second is that we focus on the social aspect of futuring. It means that at least 2/3 of our indicators relates directly to societal dimensions or societal characteristics of any social entity. But at the same time, we focus also on nature and economy as well. So we treat nature, economy, and society together, embedded in each other's. And this is also a characteristic of our index, to focus on society on the one hand, and the third characteristic, to balance somehow between the different spheres as society, nature, and economy. And of course, we are focusing also on different features or intents of social entities, which we can measure today to see how can they face with the tomorrow's challenges. So this is some kind of a dynamic approach to the problem. So I would emphasize these characteristics regarding our index.
Dr. Szántó, what is intriguing me is, how do you measure a good life? How would I measure that this is the good life, you know?
We, as I mentioned, we have 28 indicators. embedded in the normative frameworks on the one hand and embedded in the pillars on the other hand. And according to our position, if we put together these indexes in statistical manipulations, we can measure not only good life, but the preparedness of a social entity to preserve this good life in a changing world. In a changing world, as it is in the title of today's webinar, because we know, as it was also emphasized by Professor Aczél, world is changing geopolitically, socially, economically, culturally, technologically. And we have to consider these changes and we have to prepare for these changes, whether we are persons, whether we are in a family, whether we are living in a country or in a city as Singapore or Budapest. We have to be aware of the fact that we have to prepare for the changes, even if we don't know exactly what kind of changes we are approaching in the future.
This has been marvelously engaging that we've overshot our time limit. And I'm going to thank everybody now. It's been an honor to be among such accomplished individuals. I would also like to thank the FuturoKnowledge team who makes these webinars possible. Mr. Suraj Mantri, the backbone and the co-founder of FuturoKnowledge, Ms. Anupriya Iyer, one of our most conscientious team members who tirelessly works as our relationship manager, and Hardit Singh Grover, our brilliant creative director. Thank you all for such overwhelming participation. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube and follow us on our Facebook and Instagram to stay connected and for many such remarkable speakers. And please do share your preferred topics in the comment section, which you would like to be covered in our upcoming webinars. God bless. Rabraka. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Petra. Thank you, Dr. Zoltán. Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.